Hi everybody, this is Eden of Light Cycle Astrology. Welcome back to the channel, friends. Today we'll be taking a look at the Jupiter-Saturn square that is perfecting this week. And we are going to do horoscopes for all 12 rising signs because this Jupiter-Saturn square is the first opening square aspect between Jupiter and Saturn that has happened since Jupiter and Saturn came together by conjunction in Aquarius last December 2020. As I'm sure you guys all remember that big conjunction that happened. Well, now we've reached the moment where these two planets have traveled far enough to become in square with one another. And so what I thought was really important is let's bring this into the horoscope readings of all 12 rising signs so that we can get a sense of what this overall 20-year cycle between Jupiter and Saturn that began December 2020 is all about. So I'll give you an idea about what I mean. The conjunction is related to a kind of birth between Jupiter and Saturn. But just like the birth of a child, where it takes time and it takes growth and development to happen before you really fully see the characteristics or the nature or the personality of a child, right? So too does it take some time before we understand what a conjunction is all about. And when it comes to such a big conjunction like Jupiter and Saturn, right? We're not talking about Venus and the Sun, which happens all the time. We're talking about a major 20-year cycle that began back in 2020, but that maybe we didn't fully see it for the heavy gravitas that it has now. Well, right now we're at the opening square, which is representing the phase within the overall cycle that gives us the most rapid growth and development for what the cycle is going to eventually culminate into and be all about. So I thought it was really important. Let's look at the context of this square through where the conjunction took place in our birth chart based on our rising sign and where the square is falling in now. So today what we're going to do is we'll go through all 12 rising signs. And what I'll do is I'm going to demonstrate my own personal life story to give you a sense of how you could interpret this, because it's really amazing to see an example of this. And it's always easy to, if you can see something working in your own birth chart, it makes it easier to see how it could be working in other people's birth charts. So today I will use my own rising sign Scorpio and show you how this square is showing up for me personally. And hopefully that gives you a good ability to apply that to your own rising sign. So we'll go through all 12 rising signs today. Now, there are just a few things that I want to go into before we jump into the horoscopes. I want to share with you guys my notes here. I don't want to mess this up. I'm just going to start by showing you how we're going to interpret Jupiter-Saturn square that is coming in right now this week, perfecting this week, but of course is about something much larger. So the first way, or the first thing that we need to keep in mind for how we're going to interpret this square. Number one, we're going to look at the whole sign Aquarius house the conjunction fell in back in 2020 and treat this union of Jupiter and Saturn as the birth of a big 20-year cycle that is all about new life structures and development that gives us the origin story for the cycle, right? So this is Jupiter and Saturn coming together, is speaking towards a big new chapter in our lives about growth and development. And it gives us a kind of origin story for what the cycle is all about. If we look at the house that began in back in 2020 in the sign of Aquarius, right? Kind of what we were saying before just a second ago. Number two, as we examine in which house the square falls in now, we will treat Jupiter as the area of growth that is provisioning Saturn's need for duty, hard work, responsibility, etc. What do I mean by this? Well, in other words, Saturn traveling through your birth chart by transit, right? Saturn will always represent the area in life that duty is required, some place that you are meeting responsibilities or having to be really responsible, having to take something really seriously. There's a heavy burden placed on your shoulders. Sometimes there's kind of like an austerity or a limit. But rather, Saturn is going to show for us today the place that things feel like we're weighed down, we're under the duty, the responsibilities of that particular place, right? That's what we're going to look at today. But the point here is that that's not happening independent of Jupiter. The reason why we are shouldered, in other words, with that particular kind of duty or responsibility is precisely because Jupiter is growing something in a different area of our birth chart. And so we're going to take a look at that as well. Astrologers usually interpret opening squares as a kind of crossroads or as a period where we build and create that which the cycle represents, which I said a moment ago. The opening square is representing the phase in the overall cycle between Jupiter and Saturn that began when they came together in the sky. That opening square represents the time where the most development or the thing that the cycle is all about really builds up, really takes like on a construction kind of mode, right? It's like if you were going to, for instance, build a house, let's say, and you plan to live in the house for 20 years until you maybe sell it and, I don't know, move into another house or something like that. The opening square would be the part of that whole journey, not just where you buy the land, build the house, live in the house, raise the family, and then sell it down the road. That opening square is the phase where you, of course, build the house. Living in it comes down the road. So that's usually how astrologers interpret the opening square. So we're going to use that interpretation with the square today. Number 3, because Saturn is in Jupiter's sign, right? Saturn is in Pisces, traditionally a Jupiter-ruled sign. We are not just looking at a square between these two planets and giving it a standard treatment. Okay, we have archetypal Jupiter, and we're interpreting the archetypes of Jupiter coming into a square with archetypal Saturn-y things, which we would normally do. Yes, we still do that, but that what we're really saying is that Saturn is working with things that Jupiter is giving to it because Saturn is in a Jupiter place, right? It only has Jupiter things to work with. Jupiter is applying to Saturn in Jupiter's place. So to put it simply, Jupiter is growing something in your life related to the house it is now in that comes or that provides a heavy burden or is the cause, perhaps maybe, of a heavy burden or duty that requires a lot of work in the place where Saturn is now, as we also mentioned before. But those are the main points that I want to share with you guys about how I'm interpreting this square, because this is a big transit, right? This is not a light transit that we're just talking about for the week. This is in the context of the next 20 years, let's say. So now, if you have any questions, of course, with the horoscopes today, leave them in the comment section and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay, now what I want to do is let's pull up the real-time clock, and normally we are going to start with Aries if you're an Aries rising. But what I wanted to do is start with Scorpio rising today because that's my rising sign. And I wanted to give you an example of an actual story that makes it hopefully easier for you to apply the way we're interpreting this to your own rising sign. Of course, I'll go into some ideas or examples on what that might be about, but really, without knowing your own particular details of your life's story, I won't be able to like hit the bullseye and predict exactly what this is going to be about. But I will be able to give you the topics or areas of life that are all synthesizing together to hopefully provide you enough language where you can go, oh, I see what's going on. I see what Eden is talking about here. Hopefully that's how this works. Okay, but let's start off. If you are a Scorpio rising, and I do recommend everybody watching this example, even if you're not a Scorpio rising, because it'll only take a second. And this is really the framework I think needed to see this larger interpretation come to an understandable place, let's say. Okay, so Scorpio rising, me personally, the conjunction happening back on December 2020 with Jupiter and Saturn coming together in the sign of Aquarius happened for me in my 4th house, a place connected with home, family, parents, land, that which supports us. So it was at this time, actually in December specifically, that I met Kate, who is now my life partner that I have created a family with children and a home. So since 2020, first I met Kate. It wasn't long after I met her that she became pregnant. And now we have a daughter that is 16 months old. She is now pregnant again. And so we'll be having my 3rd child, her 2nd child. And we also have, she parents a child from my last marriage who is 9 and almost turning 10, which will come into the story here in a second. But anyway, back in 2020, for me, I was meeting the person that would become not just a life partner or not just a relationship. We're talking about major structural things that are lasting over the course of 20 years for me, that fundamentally wasn't just happening, oh, I'm in a relationship, this is great, I'm going to get married. No, we're talking, yes, relationship, yes, a spouse and things like that, a life partner. All of that is a big universe all on its own. But even more, children, family, even more, I'm building a home that we all live in. I've been doing it for over a year now. Now, as this week comes about, as Jupiter and Saturn perfect, this is the story. So I've been building the house, but we couldn't build the whole house in its entirety from the beginning. We had to build it in kind of like sections. And the last section to be built was the bedrooms that the children get, which over the last couple of months, the framing was done. But as this comes into perfection this week, we got the sheetrockers and the sheetrock and the mudding and the taping finished. And now it's time to paint the rooms. And then after painting, I'll lay in some flooring that'll probably only take me a couple of days, and I'll do some baseboard trim and some window trim, and then the children's room will be done. Now, my goal has been through this whole project to provide a bedroom for my 9-year-old boy who has never had his own bedroom. And so for his birthday coming up in October, that was my deadline, that I wanted him to be able to have his own room before his 10th birthday, because I felt bad he never had that. But as we have been finishing the sheetrock and all of those things, of course, we've been having people come for weeks now, working 8-hour days, and it's quite expensive. We've had to pay for the materials. So Jupiter in the 8th, yeah, my debt, the amount of money that I owe for all of this is growing. That's where we see the positive growth. Positive because I'm lucky to owe money to be able to provide something for my children. I don't look at it as a negative even. I mean, of course, nobody wants to be in debt, but I would rather be in debt because I had to build rooms for my children than be on my own, not have a family, just kind of be lonely and just by myself or something like that, right? If I look at my life and this bigger context of my life, it's a blessing that I have the ability to pay for stuff down the road or go into a little bit larger debt, because now I'm getting the bedrooms done this week and I'm getting near my goal. So everything is on track, but it's precisely the growth of that 8th house thing where Jupiter is, the debt. And because of the children that I'm obligated to provide for, that the burden or the heaviness, the responsibility, the duty is specifically coming because of the children, the 5th house topic thing. So that's my example. And it's really striking that it's so specific to the actual bedrooms of the children, right? You could have just said, well, it's the house in its entirety that is, there's the debt and stuff like that. But no, it's specifically the children's bedrooms that right now are, you were seeing the inflation of the money that had to be paid out towards labor and materials and all those things. That's, I've been asking Kate over the last week. I've been saying, when can we go buy the material for the flooring? When can we, do this or that? And she's like, do you realize that we're like, all of the money that we had for this house is pretty much gone. Like, we've given it all to finish these bedrooms. We're going to have to wait maybe to afford some of the things. And I'm feeling stressed out about this because I want Hailey to move into his bedroom before his 10th birthday and so on and so forth. But you really see the interpretation come alive with these particular house topics. So if you're a Scorpio rising, basically, the conjunction began in the 4th, and it is now spilling over into the 8th house, a place of partner resources or debt or contracts, sometimes inheritance or death. And it's providing Saturn with the material for Saturn to say, I want you to be responsible. I want you to be chained and duty bound. But to what? Maybe it has something to do with 5th house things like children. Maybe it has something to do with recreation or enjoyment or something like that. But 5th house types of things is where the burden or the heaviness is coming in, because there is a growth around a growth or inflation around the debt or the obligation to provide for another person or to be provided for by another person or something like that. But overall, it's speaking to, because there is a major 20-year cycle around the growth and development around things like family, house, property, maybe parents or something like that. So hopefully that example gives you guys enough to see how we're working with this today. And let's now move on to where we would normally start and put Aries on the ascendant. So if you are an Aries rising here, let's roll the wheel back, and there's Aries. Okay. Aries rising ascendants. The conjunction happened in your 11th house if you're an Aries rising back in 2020. And basically what we're saying is that Jupiter-Saturn comes together in the 11th, and there is some big 20-year-long emphasis on the growth or development around 11th house kinds of things. Now, the 11th house could be anything from future aspirations or goals, especially as it pertains to professional kinds of things that you want. But it can also be about the networks or groups or communities or associations or clubs that you belong to, like the social networks, be it professional in nature, be it associations, just friend groups, or even sometimes like religious groups, or even you could even see like people that belong to activist groups or churches or anything like that. But the 11th house is tying in over the next 20 years with fundamentally how you belong to the groups of people you belong to, whether they're professional in nature or other. That is where I would start. And now that is spilling into Jupiter in the 3rd, providing some growth or abundance or opportunities or some blessings around the everyday environment. So maybe there is advertising that is really promoting good things around the associations that you belong to, or there is like social media. Maybe you're blowing up as a social media influencer, and this is adding to the growth and development around the groups of people that you belong to, or something like that, right? Now, but this is precisely the kind of growth that Jupiter is providing that gives Saturn the fuel to say, I want you to be chained or responsible to something, and that something is going to be 12th house in nature. So sometimes that can be health problems with Saturn in the 12th. Sometimes that can be literally like being isolated or imprisoned. No, hopefully not, but we see Saturn in the 12th being a pretty heavy placement. What I'm thinking is, because this seems to be very social and cultural in nature, with the 11th house cycle over the next 20 years, Jupiter in the 3rd as the opening square begins, I feel like this might be about, one example could be, like, for instance, the growth and development about wisdom, cultural wisdom, or environmental wisdom as it pertains to, like, you can be wise about, you can learn a lot about culture, or you can learn a lot about the culture that you grew up in, or you can learn a lot about the etiquette, or the skills needed for sales, or something like that. But it's like the cultural aspect is somehow growing, but you need to take responsibilities because of that for who is good for you, who is bad for you. Saturn in the 12th, or what kinds of behavioral patterns that historically can trip you up. Like, how do you self-sabotage psychologically? What are the shadow sides or the destructive sides that you have to work with and pay attention to, or try to work hard on changing, or something like that, in order to have bigger development around the groups of people that you belong to, because there is this real big growth around the everyday environment that you're learning about, or becoming wise about, or are the teacher of. Maybe you're a teacher of the culture or of the environment to other people. And so you get some of these house topics that are coming in. But Saturn in the 12th can be about, I shouldn't be around these people because they are not good for me. I need to not be around these people. Or maybe I even need to not be around anybody sometimes in order to be healthy and to have better like being in a better mental space when it comes to social time or something like that. So play with those house topics. The 11th is the or I can't say that word, originating story. The 12th house is where the heavy responsibility and duty is coming from, and the 3rd house is where the growth is happening. That is the reason that you need to be responsible in the 12th. Play with that if you are an Aries rising. Okay, let's move the real-time clock forward to place Taurus on the ascendant. If you're a Taurus rising, the conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn happened back on December 2020 in your 10th house of career, of public reputation, of everyday actions or practice, and also of, we could say, just general success, but like worldly success. So whether it's a career, or whether it's becoming a parent, or whatever success looks like to you in a tangible way, that's the 10th house. So the next 20 years, there's a big part of your life that is structuring around focusing on that public 10th house career place or action place. Now, this has developed and grown to show us that how do we grow all of those 10th house things in the overall 20-year cycle. The building is happening around the 3rd house and the 11th house. So for instance, Jupiter in the 2nd might be speaking to, hey, guess what? Your bank account is growing because of all of the work that you've put into career, or something like that. You're becoming very good at, there's growth around not only potential more tangible money or assets, but maybe even around the skills needed to make more money, right? Jupiter in the 2nd can also be around about things that we know how to do, or investments that we know how to make, or the knowledge of what to invest in or what not to invest in, or the knowledge on how to have a budget or save money or anything like that. But Jupiter, the growth that's happening in the second house around all of those second house types of things is precisely the thing that gives Saturn its want for hard work and duty towards what? 11th house types of things. So we are, because of the positive growth around assets or money or skill development, we are chained to the groups of people that we associate with, to the networks of friends that we have, or to the aspirations or goals that we want for the future. Somehow we are incredibly serious, incredibly chained to those social situations or people. Very interesting. So that's what I would play with if you are a Taurus rising, are those particular house topics for this square. Okay, let's go ahead now, and we're going to place Gemini on the ascendant. So for Gemini rising, the great conjunction happened in the 9th house. This is a really interesting place to have a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction back in 2020. But the 9th house associated with a few tangible things like higher universities, colleges, higher education, also things like lawmakers and Congress, also things like traveling to foreign land or living abroad or something like that. But it can be very spiritual in nature. It can be about the bigger understanding of our lives, right? And I say that because we do spend a big part of our life not really thinking about the bigger picture, or pondering, like meditating on what am I doing here, or what is life all about, or what are these big higher ideas or ideals that are really important for me to look back on at the end of my life and have it all mean something, right? That's the 9th house, our connection to God, our connection to divinity. So that's a pretty big place to have this conjunction. But over the next 20 years, that's precisely the structure of life is somehow rooted in that place, which is going to enlighten us both spiritually and probably educationally, or expand our understanding of the meaning of life. Now, how is this going to develop as it comes to the square right now? Well, it has something to do with the first house, where Jupiter is growing something, growing positive things around identity, who you're becoming, who you are, the knowledge that you present or embody, maybe something physically about your health. And it's precisely the positive growth around you that is chaining you to let's say daily action, practice, career, or success. So there's a million different examples of this, but let's say, I don't know, let's say you start a new chapter in your life around higher education, and now you're becoming more, you identify as more now. You see yourself as maybe, like when somebody asks you, like, what do you do? Well, I do this, you're not like, well, I like chocolate and I really dislike that. Well, oftentimes you can describe yourself as, well, I'm a this or that. I do this or that. This could be like that, where you are having real success about being able to say and proclaim and identify as something that you do or that you are. But that is precisely because that is happening in a positive way. It also brings a heavy duty towards work, career, the actions. This can even relate to becoming a parent, where the higher meaning in life was to have a family. So you become a parent, you get pregnant, Jupiter in your first, but man, kids are a lot of work. And every day, day in and day out, boy, you're just chained to that daily action of actually doing that it takes for you to be that person. That's something like what we're dealing with here, I think. But keep in mind that it could have something to do with travel or religious institutions or even legal things or higher educational academia or something like that. Just keep those in mind. Okay, let's go ahead now, and we're going to put Cancer on the ascendant. If you are a Cancer rising, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction happened in your 8th house. So over the next 20 years, there is a big structural developmental life period that unfolds, it grows, it develops into something, it culminates, and it's 8th house in nature. This is interesting because the 8th house is often connected with how we are contractually conjoined with other people's resources, how we depend on others, who we depend on for what, and also how other people depend on us. It can also be sometimes about death or inheritance, or it can even be about anxiety or fear of the future. But these 8th house things are providing a 20-year story of development that is really central to life going forward ever since 2020. And somehow now that is blossomed into a major phase of activity and growth and development that has to do with 12th house and 9th house topics. Jupiter in the 12th is somehow speaking to the growth around things that may be about our healing, or how we heal other people, maybe even professionally, like doctors or nurses, people that work in hospitals. And there is some duty or obligation that, because of that positive growth around that 12th house area, we are duty bound, held down, and chained, sort of obligated. There's a heaviness around the 9th house things. 9th house things can be about higher institutions of education or learning, or even travel. So just as a for example, just the easiest example I could think for this is maybe something like back in 2020, you take out some student loans, you become a nurse, but now you're sort of obligated to be traveling around all the time. Like, you don't get to just live in one place anymore. But guess what? There's a lot of positive growth around you being able to work all over the world and care for people and heal people. So that's just one example. There are others, but I would look for these house topics and kind of see if you can see how the 8th house, a bigger story, begins there, and the major growth of this story, the major building up of what the story is about, somehow relating to positive growth around healing, around healing yourself, healing others, maybe even healing psychologically, or understanding the shadow side of yourself that you want to care for and provide healing towards, or something like that. Because the 12th house can be psychological in nature as well. But that somehow has deeper implications or responsibilities or duties around travel, or studying, or getting accreditation, or something like that, right? Okay, now let's go ahead and we'll place Leo on the ascendant. If you are a Leo rising, the great conjunction back December 2020 happened in your 7th house, a place always associated with either business partnerships, legal partnerships, marriage, relationships, things like that. So over the next 20 years, there's a big story for you that is growing and developing, a major structural story about describing what life is really all about in a big way, structurally speaking, that happens around those topics, and is now in the most intensive developmental phase that is being described by Jupiter in the 11th, and the duties or responsibility by Saturn in the 8th. So for instance, Jupiter in the 11th is speaking to the groups or associations or aspirations for the future, maybe professionally, that you hold. So it could be the friend group, or the social media group, or the religious group, or the advocate group, or the professional group, but the networks or groups of people that somehow are in a state of positive development. There's growth around the association, the social networks or associations that you hold. Maybe even the opportunities of business or career or something like that that are now coming. But somehow this burdens you at the same time with being responsible for a partner, or being dependent on a partner, or going into debt, or something eighth housey in nature, or even psychologically, maybe this is speaking to, wow, I have a lot of anxiety about the future, because I don't know, because somehow there's good things happening around my social life, but at the same time, there's something I have to work on around anxiety or stress or fear or something like that. So it could be purely psychological, but clearly this is a really social configuration. If you are a Leo rising, this is has a lot of social dynamics to it. It has the social 7th, it has the social 11th, it has the ways that we depend on or are dependent financially, potentially with the 8th house, loans, debt, things like that. So I would look to those particular house topics if you're a Leo rising, and see if you can see how this is showing up for you in detail here. Okay, hope that helps for my Leos. Now let's go ahead and we'll place Virgo on the ascendant. If you are a Virgo rising, back in 2020, we had the great conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn come together in your 6th house, a place that is about, very laborious kinds of projects that we take on, whether that is beginning a farm, or whether that is beginning a career, or whether that is going on a journey of self-healing, whether that is taking on tenants or having employees, or working in a job market that is related to like blue collar kinds of things, or even advocate groups, a place where we advocate for the downtrodden or something like that. The 6th house is showing us that over the next 20 years, there is a major life structure created around the 6th house kinds of things. So for instance, let's say back in 2020, there was the birth of like a company that you started. And let's say, just for example, maybe it's like a construction company, right? Very 6th housey. You're dealing with a lot of people that come in, and everybody has a different job. And, you know, this guy is the electrician, and this guy is the plumber, and blah, 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 right? And you have the bricklayer and all that. But let's say that somehow back in 2020, life began to structure around something like that. Very laborious, very blue collar, salt of the earth, farming, something toil based in nature, maybe something to do with health that is like really something needing you to get very in the trenches for a long time and work hard at. That's the 6th house. But now that is developing into what it's going to become by way of success or growth in the 10th house, which is great, right? There's positive growth, maybe around career, maybe around you meeting success on your terms in life, having some kind of success come to you at this time, or opportunity, or growth of business, or a reputation that is promising, that you're the one everybody looks to in the business, or something like you are the one, that you're the professor that people come to with the answers, or something like that. And you're known for having the knowledge and having the information, or something like that. 10th house in Gemini. But it's precisely because of that positive growth that somehow in the 7th, there is responsibility or duty. Maybe there's austerity. Maybe you lose a relationship. Maybe there's a divorce. Maybe your partner goes through a difficult time because you're working all the time, or what have you. But something around relationships is the place where it's taking the real the real struggle of effort, or the real like, man, I have to work really hard at this thing that has to do with a partner, a marriage, a divorce, a legal battle, or something like that, right? Maybe you don't have a partner, you're just not able to even be in a relationship right now because there is so much success at the company you started back in 2020, or, you know, whatever the example is. But hopefully this gives you enough language to apply this to your own personal situation. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll place Libra on the ascendant. If you're a Libra rising, back in 2020, the great conjunction, as it was being called, of Jupiter conjoining with Saturn happened in your 5th house. So over the next 20 years, we're talking about a major structural piece of your life that is revolving around these 5th house kinds of things, such as perhaps children, or the joy and recreation or enjoyment out of life. And now we see that the opening square is showing us how this cycle is building up to what it's eventually going to become. It has something to do with the 9th house, where Jupiter is growing 9th housey kinds of things. And it also has to do with Saturn in the 6th house, where because of the growth of 9th housey things, for some reason, there is a kind of duty or responsibility around something laborious, maybe to health, maybe to employees or tenants, maybe to just the hard labor of everyday work or something like that. My example that I came up was, let's say that back in 2020, you hear about people, sometimes they want to leave the city. They don't want to live in the city anymore. They want to have a more, they want to have a fuller life. They want to move out to the country and slow down and just have a different kind of life where you're growing your own food, being connected to the land, watching your children grow their, participate in growing the food, and having deeper connections with family or children, and not just living in the rat race or something like that. So I'm not saying that that's what this is particularly for you, but this as an example to demonstrate the houses, how they could be pulled in here. So that big 20-year structural thing that life begins to revolve around, you move, you get out, you're in the country now, you buy some land or something. And the 9th house, all of a sudden there is a really profound positive development around your connection to higher spiritual awareness, connected to the land, maybe connected to the land, your family, your partner, maybe seeing God in the life cycle around you as you raise sheep or something. There's a higher spiritual dimension that is coming in, and it's growing. But it's precisely because that's how life is for you at this time, that also brings a heavy burden to things of the 6th house. Let's say, well, it's a lot of work to have a farm and to raise those sheep and to live that way. It's a ton of work. You're tilling, you're broke all the time. I don't know, the tractor needs fixing. There's something heavy. There's some endless toil and drudgery, austerity. You're broke, or something that is just really causing a lot of like, man, I just have to keep working my fingers to the bone in order to have this a life that is providing richer meaning, deeper pleasure that isn't just connected to, I don't know, more mundane things or something like that. So I would play with those house topics if you are a Libra rising. Hopefully that will be enough language for you to get started with understanding how this square is showing up for you. All right, let's skip Scorpio since I did that at the beginning. We'll place Sagittarius on the ascendant. If you're a Sagittarius rising, the great conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn back in December 2020 took place in your 3rd house. So that is the area of life that is under this 20-year project of growing into something, developing into something very important, very structural and central to your life. It has something to do with third house kinds of things. So that could be anything from the culture that you grew up in, the culture that you are now in, the media, social media, the everyday environment, the kinds of people that you interact with, everybody from the bank teller to the grocery store person to the person that works with you. The third house is really about the interaction and exchange of ideas, information, communication that is immediate, everyday, and very mundane. And it often has a connection to cultural things or things near the home or family, like the memories you have as a child growing up where you grew up. Or the culture that you grow up in, if it's, if there's a development around the national identity or culture that you're a part of, or something like that. But the third house, often a pretty hard place to understand, but you see that it's near the fourth house. So it is close to home. It is close to family. It's always returning to the roots or the home or the family, but it's not always there. So it's this everyday commute. It's the commute in and out of work. It's the people you meet. It's the sort of water that we swim in as, if we were fish in an ocean that we don't always pay attention to. But now, as for some reason, this is really important. And especially today with social media, with influencers, with people that have their own businesses and merchandise their own stuff, everything from Etsy to YouTube to, a lot of us have these side hustles or smaller businesses or things that are really important to us that would fall into the third house in terms of merchandise, advertising, information, social media, influencing, even like you see like people on TV now who are like professional models that go on reality TV shows and this is their career, and like Love is Blind and Too Hot to Handle and like so on and so forth. This is all third housey kinds of things. But now as something began back in 2020 that is really rooted in that environment is now in a place where enough time has gone by and enough development has happened about that it's more easy to see how it's growing. And in particular, it's growing based on something in the seventh house that may be having positive growth. So Jupiter in the seventh could be a really great relationship, a really great marriage, or it could be your partner going through a phase of positive development and growth, right? But that seems to come at, this is the crux, that seems to come at the cost of something difficult or duty bound in the fourth house, some obligation around the fourth. Maybe you have to move. Maybe you lose your home. Maybe you have a wonderful relationship, but you don't live together, or, like what's an example? I know somebody who is a Sag rising who is going through a pretty big move right now. So this is a little bit of that kind of thing. But I've also been watching, what the heck is it? Is it Love is Blind? Yeah. If you watch my channel, you'll know that I'm always watching these silly reality dating shows. I just seem to like them. And I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I like them or admit that I like them, but I do. So I'll just be honest and say that, you see astrology all around you, right? And one thing that I would say for Sag risings is like, you see these people that are professional social media, kind of career-based people where they're reality TV show stars, but they have huge Instagram followings, and they get on a show like Too Hot to Handle or Love is Blind. And usually these shows are like these romantic shows where they meet a partner. So for instance, you got a Sag rising is going on a show, meets a wonderful person, falls in love, but they can't get together because one person lives in LA and their stuff is blowing up, and you live in, I don't know, the East Coast somewhere, Orlando or whatever. And somehow you just can't get together, and the home life is a struggle. There's duty, there's hardness or difficulty around the home life. But it's precisely because of the seventh house thing that is growing. So that could be one example. Another example is your partner gets a good job, you have to move, and somehow you end up really struggling around having a property or home that you love or like to be in, or something like that. Or there's austerity in the family or the home, or like you have a hard time affording the place you live, or you can't afford the place you want to be in, or something like that. Saturn in the fourth. So I would look to those things. Sometimes this can be about parents and siblings with the third and the fourth as well. So hopefully this gives you enough language with these three different houses to hone in your particular story and see how this square is unfolding. But remember that it happens within this greater context of the third house, which is often kind of a harder place to see. But think third house, you think of social media, you think of the everyday cultural environment, the cultural environment you grew up in, maybe siblings, things surrounding the home, advertising, networking, sales, information like teaching or school, like elementary schools or something like that. But think immediate environment, the cultural environment around me, maybe some connection with family or home, and hopefully that is going to provide the context you need. And let me know if you need any help. I'll try to answer as best I can. It's just hard to do some of these without any information about the details of the story, of the life story that is being applied to these particular houses. So hopefully I did a good enough job that is helpful for you guys. Okay, let's go ahead now and let's put Capricorn on the ascendant. If you are a Capricorn rising, this conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius that happened back on December 2020 happened in your second house, a place connected with finances and assets, but also the skills that you have in order to earn an income or make money. It's like it's not just that you do so-and-so to make a paycheck. It's that you have to have a skill that can earn you the money that gets you the paycheck. So the second house isn't just the paycheck. It's also the skills that you bring forward in the world that are like your tools to make money or something like that, right? It's the second house is a good way to think of it is like the your personal garden that you plant seeds in that will one day bring you material support, if you will. So having a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the second house, if you're a Capricorn rising, is clearly bringing you into a major 20-year developmental cycle, a Jupiter-Saturn cycle that is fundamentally about how do you become financially secure, how do you grow financial skills, assets, investments, stuff like that, right? Now, how is this going to develop going forward? It's been enough time since 2020 to really see how this is beginning to move into a rapid stage of building and growing, and you see what it is that is happening with or in regards to the second house theme, right? And we have Jupiter in the sixth house, growing something. There's abundance around maybe everything from if you're a land owner or a property owner to if you are a business owner to maybe even something like personal health. The sixth house is positively growing and developing, and there's some real like feet under the toil, the hard work that you're putting into something. But it's precisely because of that growth or blooming of your ability to work hard and have that come to something, that fruit that is leading towards bigger asset development, I should think. That is also the thing that is providing some kind of real challenge or duty or responsible heaviness in the third house around your everyday environment. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say that you have a business, and let's say that, I don't know, it's like a construction company, and you are getting some real success around the bids that you're getting, and you're doing big jobs, right? You're getting hired to do big renovations or something like that. But man, are you tied to having to always be slaved to the comings and goings of the materials, picking stuff up, delivering it, what do you call it, like organizing all of the things and the details and the who's and the what's and the where's, and all of that stuff is just massively weighing down. And it's like the everyday activity is just like so heavy, but you're working hard and things are happening and things are growing, and it's all leading to something that seems positive, but it's just the mundane heaviness and the details, the commutes, the exchanges, the phone calls, the emails, all of that stuff, man, that's just seems like you're just chained to those types of things. Now, Capricorn rising signs are no stranger to being really pragmatic, being really responsible, being really forward thinking, and seeing the view down the road and what needs to happen to get there, and all of that kinds of stuff. So this could be maybe not such a strange thing to work with, but I think that hopefully this describes kind of what is going on with this square for you. Let me know in the comments what you think about that, or if you have a story that helps me understand in particular. With the details of personal life stories, you really see how this stuff will be playing out, but hopefully I give you enough of the language here today where you can sort of fit in your story to these topics. Again, we have the conjunction happening in the second house, where a big part of life moving forward over the next 20 years is this development around the resources or the income or the ability to make money, the investments, the budgets, all of that kind of stuff. And there is something positive growing in all of that hard work, but the details, the communications, the commutes, all of those everyday mundane things they're a lot. You know what I mean? Okay, let's go ahead now, and we'll put Aquarius on the ascendant. If you are an Aquarius rising, back in December 2020, you had this conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter come together in your first house. So that's a pretty big place to have such a big conjunction happen. And over the next 20 years, there is a major part of life that is structured around those first house kinds of topics. So for instance, this could be somebody that over the next 20 years is going to be a big part of their life is really rooted in their personal health, maybe diet, exercise, maybe even psychological development in terms of like becoming really healthy, therapy, anything like that. Although it could be also a kind of culmination about who you are. Jupiter-Saturn conjoining and having a birth in your first house can at times be something like the birth of a new me that is really powerful, going to be really successful, and is almost feels like very solid, I'm a very solid individual that has the wisdom and the maturity to just fully understand and embody who I have been and who I'm going to be going forward, carrying that embodied wisdom and understanding. It's a really profound place to have it, but it will definitely expand out over the next 20 years, rooted and focused in that area, whether it's health or physical things or psychological things or identity or personality. Now, what has happened is that enough time has gone by where we see the development of all of those things spreading out into the topics of the fifth house where Jupiter is, and the topics of the second house where Saturn is. So there's positive growth around the fifth house kinds of things, whether that's children, whether that's the ability to enjoy life and find pleasure and joy in life, which is also important to health and who we are as people. But it comes, it seems, at a cost to the duties or responsibilities of managing our assets, our money, or skill development, or income, or something like that. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you want to become independent. You want to just you want to make money on your own. You want to, who you are as a person is enough to say, I'm going to do this by myself. I'm going to make my own money. And maybe it's a little bit risky. Maybe you're involved in the markets or in trade or in not gambling, but betting or something like that. You know, like the real estate market. It doesn't have to be like anything weird, but stock trading, investments or something like that. Now, in order to be that sort of like stand on your own person, be who you are as an individual, who you see yourself going forward, and more than that, being a person that you want to be, that to you feels like it's about being a healthy you, right? The healthiest, best you that you can be, somehow has to include those fifth house things. And now those are prospering. So you're getting positive results. You're the speculation into the market is growing in a positive way, and it's having a positive impact on your self-esteem or something like that. But it's coming at the cost of maybe some losses financially, or you're having to put in all your own money into something in order to speculate or something like that. Another example could be somebody that sees themselves as a good parent and says, you know what, I had children when I was younger, and now I really, really want my children to go off to college, and I want good things for them. And for me to be the healthiest person of myself is to know that I am doing everything I can to make sure my children get a good education. And so Saturn in the second, it's a lot of responsibility and duty. I am really having to make more money to pay for it, or I'm really having to, I'm losing a lot of money to pay for it, or there's some kind of austerity. I have to save money to pay for it, or something like that. So hopefully you can see the quintessential thing is that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the first is fundamentally about who you believe and know to be your healthiest self, and how that's really, really, really important, and how it may pertain to positive things around recreation, enjoyment out of life, or having children or caring for children. But somehow there is the need, the duty, the responsibility to make more money, to be chained to your bank account, or making money that goes into the bank account in order to pay for things, to be responsible in that way. Or maybe the austerity or loss around money, maybe having to save and really live frugally or something like that. There's something in the actual bank account taking a hit, or being restricted, or needing you to just really keep a really close eye and work hard on it, or something like that, right? So hopefully that is enough language to clue you into what's happening with your own life story if you're an Aquarius rising. Okay, now let's go ahead and lastly, let's place Pisces on the ascendant. If you're a Pisces rising, the great conjunction back in December 2020 happened in your 12th house. It's a pretty interesting place to have a conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter, a place that is associated with the hidden dimensions of our psyche, especially as it pertains to ways that we undermine ourselves, and also circumstances or people that also undermined our life. So it can have to do with those things. It can also have to do with healing and being isolated or sometimes even incarcerated. So this is pretty interesting. I'm going to give you an example for this. Nelson Mandela, who we all know his story, right? He was imprisoned, but it was the imprisonment that developed and grew something very structural within him over that unfortunate imprisonment that led him to become this great individual that came after, right? It's hard to say, and nobody would want, but it's hard to say, would that have happened without that tribulation? The 12th house has that kind of tribulatory, isolated, incarcerated sort of kind of feeling to it, you know. But sometimes it's being in those places, being in that suffering, or in that lonely, or in that spiritual alone place, that is precisely what is needed to become something very, very healed and very great as a person, as a soul, not as somebody who has a job and does this for a living, but I mean, just as a you down the road, you know. Great yous or great us, right? We make for amazing people on the planet, like a Nelson Mandela, right? That leads to greatness at times. The 12th house is often healing. So a big conjunction back in 2020. Over the next 20 years, it seems as though there is a very big structural part of life that is about a major cycle for the next 20 years relating to healing other people, healing yourself, and having enough time in isolation, or maybe even time incarcerated in some way, not maybe potentially actually in a prison, but somehow held in, I don't know, in limbo, or held in a psychological metacosmia, like a place that's like in between worlds. There's an interesting place here that is in the shadows. It's in the shadow side of our personalities, or even in the shadowy places where we commingle with people that aren't good for us, or something like that. That's where we're meant to sort of have this big structure develop, culminate, and be a big part of our life story, as it were. Now we come to the first quarter square, where enough time has gone by, we see what that was all about. It's more easy to see it, and it has something fundamentally to do with positive growth around the home or the family, maybe with the father, or property, or something fourth house in nature that is going through some good growth. Maybe there's a great home that we now have, or there is a wonderful family that we're now in, or there's good things happening with our father. There's maybe an inheritance, or we're sharing a family business and we're working with our dad, and it's leading to some really good things. But all of those things are maybe isolating in some way, and is putting us in that otherworldly place of understanding how to heal and deal with our own shadow personality traits and maybe their shadow personality traits and something like this. And it's causing a heavy duty or burden in the first house where Saturn is, that may be speaking to a kind of, I'm the person that's responsible for all of this. All the weight is on my shoulders to be this person. I'm taking on the world here. I have to sort of limit who I am to make all this other stuff happen or be taken care of or something. There's heaviness in who you are, who you have to be. All of that seems really heavy. So that is what I would say if you are a Pisces rising. We've made it through all 12 rising signs. Hope this was useful and there was enough language to get a start on deciphering your own personal life story as it pertains to the Great Conjunction back in 2020 and where we are now with the square between Jupiter and Saturn. If not, and you want some help, go ahead and leave them in the comment section. I'll do my best to answer. And if you want even more help, you can always go to lightcycleastrology.com, sign up for a reading, and we can dive deeper into the cycle as a whole. Until then, I will see you guys next week. Hope you guys have a good one, and bye for now.